everyone, it's Paola. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I am honored to have once again the lovely Anna-Marie McLemore, the author of The Mirror Season. So, hi Anna-Marie, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about The Mirror Season?
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful to get to talk with you again. So I'm Anna-Marie McLemore. My pronouns are they, them. My most recent books are Dark and Deepest Red and last fall, Miss Meteor with Taylor K. Mejia. And I don't have the book yet. I'm really excited for when I get to see final copies next month, March 16th. The Mirror Season will be coming out. And The Mirror Season is the story of a queer Latina girl and a white boy who are both sexually assaulted at the same party, and who in the months after find their fates intertwined as they find their voices and their power in the magic of vanishing trees and enchanted pan dulce and a family pastelería.
It's such an amazing book and it's hard to read. So just trigger warning for everyone else. It deals with sexual assault. It's a really, really good book. So everyone should go grab it, pre-order it already. So why did you decide to write about these two kind of survivors, the queer Latina girl of color and a boy?
I've sort of had complicated relationships with conversations that have happened about sexual assault and consent and survivorship, and I'm very grateful for them. I'm grateful for the fact that we're talking about it, but also, especially when I was first like understanding my experience as a survivor, I often kind of felt like I there wasn't really a place for me or my identities in those conversations. I'm of color, I'm mixed race, I'm Latinx, and as I've sort of come out recently, like I'm non-binary, I'm trans, like so those aspects of identity, like I didn't really know what to do with them in terms of my my place as a survivor and my experience as a survivor. So I wanted to write about experiences that in some ways paralleled mine. I haven't really officially like come out as pan. I've just started talking to a few people about it. Like I am pansexual. I do identify as pansexual. And like um how does your queer identity interact with your experience of trauma? Like how do you understand yourself in that context? How do you claim yourself? How do you celebrate your identity in the wake of trauma? So in that way, that paralleled my experience in Ciela's like experience of being a queer Latina survivor. Writing Locke, like the boy in this story, in a way, his experience is very different from mine. He's a white, straight, cis boy. I wanted to write about like how he deals with the concept of like of masculinity, and how he understands himself as a survivor, and how he sort of like claims his own power while acknowledging his own privilege, and does that, like comes into these conversations with Ciela like knowing that he has like a lot of privilege, and acknowledging that and understanding that, so that is a good thing. But on the other side, he also has like this relationship with his own masculinity of like I should have been able to not let this happen to me. So this double standard that is heartbreaking, but also happens a lot. So looking at his experience and writing about his experience of that conception of gender that was both very different from my experience and also overlaps with my experience, like my own sense of masculinity, my own sense of being non-binary and trans, and what did that do to me? In what ways did I like handle being a survivor and conceiving of myself as a boy, and like what did that mean to me? And also, how did being a survivor like send me sort of further back in the closet in terms of being queer, and especially in terms of being non-binary? So this is one book that I hope is one of many books that helps like open the conversations we have about how identity intersects with trauma, because there's no part of your identity that trauma doesn't touch, and there's no experience you have that your identity does not touch.
I mean, and that is so well addressed and it's so delicately put in the book that it makes it really heartbreaking to read, but it's also a very hopeful book. I love that Ciela and Locke form a very like unlikely and cautious friendship after their assault. Like you mentioned, they talk about their experience and what, like how it affected them individually. So why was it so important for you to discuss this in the book?
Something that ended up being really important in this book was the idea of humor and laughter, which sounds out of place when you think about a book that's talking about sexual assault. But one, like you need in a book like this, you often need you need humor. You need the characters to find ways to laugh because as to sort of like to have that be something that or that a reader, especially a reader who has any who like has any experience with trauma, like for that to be able to be something that you can go to, like for a book to be a space you can go to and know that you're going to be understood, but also know that there will be moments where like you get to breathe because there's less tension, you get to laugh. So that's one thing that was ended up being really necessary in this book, just from a story perspective, but also like something I've found with like being in conversation like and being in friendships with other survivors, like we have to find ways to laugh. Like we make each other laugh, we joke about things, we that humor is so important. That idea of knowing that you're understood, knowing that that who you're talking to like knows your heart and knows your pain, but also that there's going to be space for humor, there's going to be space for laughter, and in the same way I think that's part of why I brought magic into this, because it's this idea of like reclaiming who you are and having that celebration of who you are, and going back to the idea of identity for a minute. Like Ciela's pansexuality is something that she celebrates, and that she did celebrate in the beginning, and that she learns to celebrate again. So magic, both in terms of like literal magic, like the enchanted pan dulce, and figurative magic, like the magic of identity. Those were things that were really important in your friendships, whether that's friendships between survivors, or whether that's friendships with other people in your community. And the friendship between Ciela and Locke, the way that they sort of reinforce like what they like celebrating who they are, and finding those moments of laughter, like that's part of how you get through things like those friendships with people who understand, even if their experiences are different from yours.
Yeah, I love that. It just really highlights the importance of seeing friendship in fiction. See,
Thank you.
so you talked a little bit about magic and how it's affected Ciela. Why did you decide that it was going to be like such a crucial part of her like recovery?
So I think part of it was this idea of family. Like whenever I'm writing magical realism, I'm thinking of magic as belonging more to a community than an individual. Whether that community is your family, or whether that's your community in a larger sense. The magic of Pan Dulce, of this family pastelería, the fact that that's so important to Sierra is partially because of the connection to family, and also because this is part of like this is one of her like love languages. So it's part of her identity, both as an individual and as someone within her family, and as someone within her community. Finding that again and acknowledging how trauma impacts that, and also finding that again. There's one scene I remember writing where she's making pan dulce that are like different pride flag colors, because these are like this is important to her, and these are sort of the intersections of things that matter to her. I'm thinking of this especially because like this is the first time I'm doing any kind of conversation in my new flower crown. Like I haven't, like by the time this video comes out, I will have probably worn it to a couple other things, but this is my first time like talking in my flower crown, and I wanted to make my pansexual flower crown as kind of a symbol of we hold on to who we are. I've been making flower crowns for different books for a little bit. It's something I love doing, and it's something I wanted to do for this book too, because the survivors, like we still have fun, we light up our own hearts, others and each other find out like what lights up their own hearts. That's something that I think is a joyful thing, even if it's in the wake of something heartbreaking.
It is a really beautiful journey to go with Ciela, even though, like you said, it's heartbreaking, but it's hopeful and it's very, very necessary. In an interview for Shattering Stigmas, you said I start with the truths I know, but storytelling sometimes also challenges me on those truths. Because to imagine happy endings for my characters, I have to question some of what I heard growing up. That I have to imagine that a boy, sometimes girl like me, could live a happier life than I ever thought. So, what is the importance of finding those happy endings in your stories and in your characters and in yourself?
I think part of why I didn't really know if someone like me could have a happy ending, like growing up, could have a happy life growing up, is because I didn't see a lot of representation of like characters like me, like finding their lives in happy, joyful ways. And when I'm writing, I have to still question like what I learned to believe about about being queer and mixed race, about being trans and non-binary, like the things that made me afraid to really like claim who I was, especially when you get into the intersection of being Latinx and being queer and being trans. I love my communities. Like I love being Latinx. I We have a long way to go. At least in the communities that like I know. And I think we are going forward, but there's a long way to go. So writing stories in which characters, especially with these intersectional identities, um, can have stories where there's room for joy. So questioning what I knew and what I thought I knew. It's kind of a parallel journey to wondering if my communities could like be on the page, because that took me a while too, and it's something that I still think about, like letting my communities and letting my identities onto the page. So in that same way, like once I've done that, like, then there's that step of leaving space for that hope and that happiness. I think of that as far more possible than I did growing up, and that's something I'm really grateful for.
I love the way you write and I love the way you like express yourself. Like I remember when JK Rowling did, her whole thing and you went on Twitter and I was like, thank God for Anna-Marie McLemore. Like we need voices like yours.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to be here talking with you.
Moving on to a lighter topic. This is the fill in the bookish blanks section. So the first book you ever loved was?
The answer to this, or at least the one I'm thinking about, and I'll say why in a second, is this like picture book version of the Snow Queen that I had when I was little. And I'm thinking about this because there are elements of the Snow Queen in Mirror Season. It's not exactly a retelling or a reimagining so much as like the Snow Queen is kind of this character that stays with Sierra, like this question of like who is this person, like how did she end up feeling like more at home in snow and ice and cold, like what happened to her that we're not asking about. Why are we so quick to accept that she's a villain when we don't know anything about her story. So that's something that's there that's there in Mirror Season, and I think that's why I'm thinking about that book, that like picture book version of Snow Queen that I had. And I just like I would just go through it over and over. It was one of those books that just got destroyed by the time I was done with it because of how many times I read it.
I love that. Picture books are they're just magic and I love it. The first book I bought with my own money was?
Speaking of the magic of picture books, I will say I was reading picture books like far past when my classmates were, because I'm dyslexic, and those were books that were easier for me to read. So in this time where I was struggling with reading because like I thought I knew how to read, and then I was told that I was reading wrong, and it like it sort of scared me off reading. Picture books were this beautiful place where I'm like, I know these words, like I can read these words, I can confidently say these words. So I'm remembering this one picture book that I think the first book I bought with my own money was about like this rabbit like mixing different paint colors, and it's just like it had these beautiful illustrations. It was just one of those things where like I thought I was doing something wrong by still reading picture books, but now like as an adult I'm like, yes, picture books are amazing. I'm going to read all the picture books I want and encourage everyone else to read them too.
I love that. That's so great. My first book idea was
I really wanted to write a book about gymnastics because I was doing gymnastics at the time, specifically like rhythmic gymnastics with like the ribbon and everything. I saw some sports books and I thought it would be something that I wanted to write about. I never wrote it because I think at the time I didn't really think that I could be a writer, especially like struggling with reading as much as I did. But yeah, I was really into gymnastics, so it was probably that.
maybe one day. The song that reminds me the most of my book is
I'm probably going to do two for this. The really intense one that I would think about is the Dress by Emily Scott Robinson. It's this like beautiful, heartbreaking song about being a survivor and about like sort of memory and when things come back unexpectedly. There's also one that I would put on repeat sometimes when I was thinking about scenes. Hey Now by London Grammar. It has a lot of instrumental to it. It's one of those songs that's like pretty minimalistic on lyrics that would just get me into this writing brain headspace. Probably both of those in very different ways.
finally tell us about The Gay Gatsby and your other future projects.
Oh gosh, that's going to be the unofficial title, like for like forever. I think we're talking about titles right now, but I think the Gay Gatsby is going to be the working title at least for the time being. So The Great Gatsby is one of those books I had this kind of love-hate relationship with, and I think that's where a lot of like my reimaginings come from anyways. That was one of those books for me, like one of those assigned reading books that like I fell into the language of. And also, I'll just be honest, like being dyslexic, like it was short. I could finish that book. So it was one of those that I loved the glamour of it and also the fact that there was so much underneath that like some of it was talked about in the text and some of it wasn't, and that made me angry. And there are these characters that I wanted to know more about. So in my reimagining of The Great Gatsby, Jay Gatsby is going to be a trans guy, and the Nick Carraway Jay Gatsby romance that I always thought should have happened, like, is going to happen. And Daisy Buchanan is my reimagining of Daisy Buchanan. I think I might change her name a bit. She's going to be a Latina lesbian socialite, and so she's going to have this like this whole life that sort of is independent of the men who like either want her or think they want her. It's something that when the announcement came out and I started talking about what I was going to do with this, I was so like excited and so grateful that like so many of the things that I want to explore were things other readers of that book were wondering about. So I'm looking forward to reading about that, writing about that, and also writing about this idea of picking apart the American dream and like loving this country and also like having your heart broken by it. That's something that I know is going to be hard to write about, but is something I wanted to know more about when I read The Great Gatsby.
It's really, really amazing to see that these classics are gonna get retold. And the covers are also beautiful. Like
Oh, they're incredible. Like I think it's just the first two that are out, and they're absolutely gorgeous. My husband is so excited to read Bethany's like Little Women. Like my husband didn't even like Little Women growing up, and is like cannot wait for Bethany's version of Little Women.
I really cannot wait for The Gay Gatsby. I really hope that's like, can you imagine? It would be amazing if that's the title. That would be amazing. Thank you so much for chatting with me. You know, I love your books. I love the way you just express yourself on the internet. I hope everybody else also enjoyed this interview. Don't forget to pre-order Anna-Marie McLemore's The Mirror season out on March 16th.
Thank you so much for having me.
I love having you. Thank you everyone else for watching, and we will see you soon. Bye.